The moment Clara Bennett signs her name on that marriage certificate, she knows three things with absolute certainty. Her husband doesn't love her, this mansion feels like a tomb, and somewhere in the shadows of this billionaire's empire lies the real reason her dying father begged her to marry a complete stranger. But here's what she doesn't know yet. The truth will nearly destroy them both. So stick with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see just how far Clara's journey travels across the world. The rain hammered against the funeral home windows like it was trying to break through, trying to wash away everything Clara Bennett had left. She stood alone beside her father's casket, her black dress soaked through from the walk she'd taken earlier through the cemetery, her shoes ruined, her hair plastered to her face. Nobody else had come. Not her mother who'd left when Clara was 6, not the cousins who'd stopped calling years ago, not the friends from the diner where she worked double shifts just to pay for medication that didn't work anyway. Just Clara. Just the rain. Just the suffocating weight of being completely, utterly alone at 30 years old, with $17,000 in medical debt and nowhere left to turn. Miss Bennett? The funeral director appeared in the doorway, holding a manila envelope like it might bite him. Your father left this, asked us to give it to you after the service. Clara took it with numb fingers. The envelope was thick, heavier than she expected. Her father's handwriting sprawled across the front in shaky letters. For Clara, open alone. She waited until the funeral home closed, until even the director had left, before she ripped it open in her car parked outside in the pouring rain. Inside was a letter, handwritten on yellowed paper, and something else, a business card. Expensive cardstock. Embossed lettering. Ethan Calloway. Calloway Hotels International. Clara stared at the name. It meant nothing to her. Then she read the letter. My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry I couldn't explain this to your face. I'm a coward that way. Always have been. 23 years ago, I made a promise to a boy who saved my life. I was doing landscaping work at his family's estate in Newport, just temporary work. Cash under the table. The boy was 9 years old and his stepmother was destroying him piece by piece. I saw things no child should endure. Things I should have reported but didn't because I was a coward then too. One night, he ran. Found me working in the garden at midnight because I couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop thinking about what was happening inside that house. He begged me to help him, so I did the only thing I could think of. I got him out. Got him somewhere safe. His stepmother tried to have me arrested, tried to destroy me, but the boy's grandfather stepped in. Powerful man. Made it all go away. Before the boy left with his grandfather, he made me promise something. He was 9 years old, Clara, and already he understood debt and honor better than most adults ever will. He said, someday I'll repay you, whatever you need, whenever you need it, I promise. I never forgot. Never asked him for anything either, even when your mother left, even when money got tight. Even when you were eating cereal for dinner 3 nights a week. But I kept track of him, watched him grow up from a distance, watched him build an empire, watched him lose his wife, watched him raise his daughter alone. And now I'm dying, and you're going to be left with nothing but my debts and my failures, and I'm finally calling in that promise. Clara, I need you to marry Ethan Calloway. I know how this sounds. I know you think I've lost my mind. Maybe I have. But listen to me, this isn't what you think. This isn't me selling you off or some desperate old man's fantasy. Ethan needs you as much as you need him right now, even if neither of you knows it yet. He's agreed to everything. He'll pay off every cent of debt I left you. He'll give you a home, security, a life beyond those double shifts at the diner. In exchange, you'll be his wife in name, attend his events, live in his house, help him present the image of a stable family man. That's all. He won't ask for anything more. But Clara, and this is important, don't let him convince you he's just ice and business deals. I've watched him for 23 years. I've seen what he doesn't let the world see. He's the boy who ran through a garden at midnight looking for someone to save him. He's still running, still looking. He just doesn't know it. Trust me one last time. Please. Go to Newport, meet him, sign the papers, and maybe, just maybe, you'll both find what you've been missing. I love you more than I ever knew how to say. Dad. Clara read it twice, then 3 times. Then she sat in her car in the rain outside the funeral home and laughed until she cried, or cried until she laughed. She honestly couldn't tell the difference anymore. Marry a billionaire. Sure. Why not? What else was she going to do? Go back to her studio apartment with the broken heater and the landlord who'd already threatened eviction? Go back to smiling at customers who snapped their fingers at her and left $2 tips on $50 tabs? She pulled out her phone, dialed the number on the business card with shaking hands. A woman answered, professional voice, the kind of smooth competence that came from answering phones in buildings with marble lobbies. Callaway Hotels International, Executive Office. I need to speak with Ethan Callaway. Clara's voice sounded foreign to her own ears. Tell him it's about Thomas Bennett. A pause. One moment, please. The hold music was classical, expensive. Clara watched rain stream down her windshield and wondered if she was actually having a breakdown. Maybe she'd wake up and her father would still be alive and none of this would be happening. The music cut off. Clara Bennett. Not a question, a statement. His voice was deep, controlled, absolutely devoid of warmth. Your father told me you might call. He's dead. I know. I sent flowers. You didn't notice them at the service. Clara's throat tightened. I didn't notice anything. Understandable. A pause, papers rustling in the background. I assume you read his letter. Yeah. And? And this is insane. Completely. He said it matter-of-factly, like they were discussing the weather. Nevertheless, the offer stands. 12-month contract, renewable if both parties agree. I'll clear your father's debts immediately upon signing. You'll receive a monthly allowance, full access to the estate, and a lump sum payment at the end of the contract period, regardless of whether we renew. In exchange, you'll fulfill basic spousal duties, public appearances, charity events, maintaining the appearance of a stable household. Clara pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. This is actually happening. Only if you agree to it. What if I say no? Then you say no. I'm not in the habit of forcing women into unwanted marriages, Miss Bennett. Your father asked me to make this offer. I'm honoring his request. What you do with it is entirely your choice. Something in his voice, not unkindness exactly, but a kind of distant courtesy, made her sit up straighter. Did you love him? My father? The pause lasted long enough that Clara thought he might hang up. He saved my life when I was 9 years old, Ethan Callaway said finally. And he never asked me for anything in return until 3 months ago when he called to tell me he was dying and his daughter was going to be left with nothing. So no, I didn't love him. But I owed him everything. Clara closed her eyes, heard her father's voice in her head. Trust me one last time. When do you need an answer? The car will arrive at your apartment tomorrow at 10 a.m. If you're not there, I'll have my answer. He hung up. Clara sat in the rain and thought about cereal for dinner and broken heaters and the way her manager at the diner looked at her like she was already a ghost, already gone, already nothing. Then she drove home, packed everything she owned into 2 suitcases, and waited. Eats. The black car arrived at 9:45. Professional, expensive. A driver in a suit who didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk, just loaded her sad little suitcases into the trunk like they were Louis Vuitton instead of held together with duct tape. The drive to Newport took 2 hours. Clara watched Providence disappear in the rearview mirror and felt nothing. No fear, no excitement, just a strange, hollow sense that she'd already left her real life behind the moment her father stopped breathing. The Callaway estate materialized out of coastal fog like something from a fever dream. It wasn't a house. It was an architectural statement. Glass and stone and angles that shouldn't work, but somehow did, perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic like it was daring the ocean to try something. The driveway alone was longer than her entire apartment building. The gardens sprawled in every direction, perfectly manicured lawns, sculptured hedges, and there, off to the east side, a massive rose garden that even from this distance looked like something out of a fairy tale. Her father's work. She knew it instantly. Recognized his style in the way the paths curved, the way the roses were layered by color and height. He'd planted this, touched every bush, designed every bed. The car stopped at the front entrance. The driver opened her door. Mr. Callaway is waiting in his study, he said. I'll take your bags to your room. Clara climbed out on unsteady legs. The front door opened before she reached it. Another staff member, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional smile. Miss Bennett, I'm Margaret, the house manager. Please, follow me. The inside of the house was worse than the outside. Everything was expensive and beautiful and absolutely cold. Marble floors. Art that probably cost more than Clara would earn in a lifetime. Furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. The whole place felt like a museum, like somewhere people visited but didn't live. Margaret led her through hallways that seemed to go on forever, finally stopping at a set of double doors. "Mr. Calloway asked not to be disturbed," she said gently, "but he's expecting you. Just knock." Clara knocked. "Come in?" She pushed open the door. The study was all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and windows overlooking the ocean. And there, behind a desk that probably cost more than a car, sat Ethan Calloway. He looked up, and Clara's breath caught. The photos online hadn't prepared her. Those showed a businessman in expensive suits at charity galas and hotel openings. They didn't show this, the sharp angles of his face, the gray eyes that looked right through her, the exhaustion written in every line of his body, despite the perfect posture. He was handsome in a way that made her uncomfortable, like a knife was handsome, dangerous, precise. "Miss Bennett?" He stood, tall, controlled. Everything about him screamed power and money and absolute self-discipline. "Please, sit." Clara sat in the leather chair across from his desk and felt about 12 years old. Ethan didn't waste time. He pushed a stack of papers across the desk. "The contract. Read it thoroughly. Ask any questions you have. My lawyer is available by phone if you need clarification on any points." Clara stared at the papers. They looked official, terrifying. "I don't need a lawyer," she heard herself say. "My father trusted you. That's enough." Something flickered across Ethan's face. Not quite emotion, just a brief crack in the mask. "Your father was a better man than I am. He thought highly of you. He thought highly of a 9-year-old boy he helped a long time ago. I'm not that boy anymore." Clara met his eyes. "Then who are you?" The question seemed to surprise him. He leaned back in his chair, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "I'm a man honoring a debt," he said finally. "Nothing more complicated than that." "My father seemed to think it was more complicated." "Your father was sentimental." "You say that like it's a weakness." "In business, it is." "Good thing this isn't business, then." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Miss Bennett, let's be very clear about what this is and isn't. This is a contractual arrangement. You need financial stability. I need the appearance of a stable family life. We're both getting something out of this transaction. But it's not a real marriage. It's not a romance. It's not anything other than what's written in that contract." Clara looked down at the papers, saw her father's handwriting in her mind. "Don't let him convince you he's just ice and business deals." "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, what?" "Okay, I'll sign." She picked up the pen he'd placed on top of the contract. "But I want to ask you something first." Ethan's expression didn't change. "Ask." "The rose garden, out front, east side. My father designed that, didn't he?" The mask cracked, just for a second, just enough for Clara to see something underneath, something raw and carefully hidden. "Yes," Ethan said. 23 years ago, when he worked here briefly." "Why did you keep it all these years?" "It's a nice garden." "That's not an answer." Ethan stood abruptly, walked to the window, his back to her. When he spoke again, his voice was different, quieter. "Because he was the only person who ever asked me if I was okay. The only adult who looked at me and saw that something was wrong. And when I told him the truth, he didn't tell me to be strong or brush it off or pretend it wasn't happening. He just helped me. No questions, no judgment, just help." He turned back to her. The mask was back in place, but Clara had seen behind it now. "The garden is a reminder," Ethan continued, "that there are good people in the world, that debts should be honored, that promises matter." Clara signed the contract without reading it. The wedding happened 3 days later in the study where they'd first met. No guests, no flowers, just a judge who asked the required questions in a bored voice, Margaret and the driver as witnesses, and a little girl who watched from the doorway with huge dark eyes. Ethan's daughter, Sophie, 5 years old and heartbreakingly quiet. "You may kiss the bride," the judge said, already packing up his briefcase. Ethan looked at Clara. Clara looked at Ethan. Neither of them moved. "Or not," the judge said. Congratulations, you're married. He left. Margaret and the driver followed, leaving Clara and Ethan alone in the study with a little girl still watching from the doorway. Ethan saw her. His entire demeanor changed. The ice melted, the walls came down. He crossed the room and knelt in front of his daughter. Hey, sweetheart, come here. Sophie ran to him. He caught her, held her tight, and Clara saw what her father had meant. This wasn't a cold businessman. This was a father who loved his daughter so fiercely it hurt to watch. Is she my new mommy? Sophie whispered loud enough for Clara to hear. Ethan hesitated, just for a second. Clara is my wife now. She's going to live here with us. Like a mommy? Like a friend who lives here. Sophie peeked around Ethan's shoulder to look at Clara. Do you like princesses? Clara felt something crack open in her chest. I love princesses. Do you like tea parties? They're my favorite. Sophie's face lit up. She squirmed out of Ethan's arms and ran to Clara, grabbing her hand with sticky fingers. Come see my room. I have a castle and everything. Clara looked at Ethan. He stood slowly, his expression unreadable. Go ahead, he said. I have work to do anyway. So Clara let herself be dragged through the mansion by a 5-year-old tour guide who showed her every toy and book and dress in her enormous bedroom, chattering nonstop about her favorite cartoons and the cat she wanted but couldn't have because Daddy said no, and how sometimes she got sad because she didn't have a mommy, but now maybe she did. Clara sat on the floor of Sophie's Princess Castle playhouse and felt her heart breaking and mending at the same time. Your daddy is right, she said gently when Sophie finally wound down. I'm not your mommy, but I can be your friend. Would that be okay? Sophie thought about it seriously. Can friends have tea parties? Absolutely. And read books? As many as you want. And help me when I have bad dreams? Clara's throat tightened. Yeah, sweetheart. Friends can do that too. Sophie smiled. It was the first real smile Clara had seen in this cold house. Okay, Sophie said. You can be my friend. The room they gave Clara was on the opposite end of the house from Ethan's. Margaret showed her to it that evening with an apologetic smile. Mr. Calloway thought you'd prefer the east wing, she said. More privacy, and you have a lovely view of the gardens. The room was bigger than Clara's entire apartment had been. King bed, sitting area. Bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people. Windows that overlooked the rose garden, just like Margaret said. Clara stood at those windows as the sun set over the ocean and watched the roses turn gold in the fading light. Her father's roses. She could almost see him out there, younger, healthier, kneeling in the dirt and planning where each bush would go. Had he known then? Had he looked at that scared 9-year-old boy and somehow seen the man he'd become? Seen this moment 23 years later, when his daughter would stand in this room and wonder what the hell she'd agreed to. A knock on the door. Come in. Ethan stood in the doorway in jeans and a t-shirt, looking somehow more dangerous in casual clothes than he had in the suit. More real, more human. Margaret said you didn't come down for dinner. I wasn't hungry. You need to eat. I'm fine. He stepped into the room, looked around like he'd never seen it before. This was going to be the nursery, he said abruptly. When my wife was pregnant with Sophie, she wanted the east wing because of the morning light, said it would be perfect for a baby. Clara turned from the window. I can move if he... No. He cut her off. She never got to use it anyway. Sophie came early. Complications. By the time we brought Sophie home from the hospital, my wife was too sick to care about which room was which. She died 3 months later. Clara didn't know what to say. Didn't know if she was supposed to say anything. I'm telling you this, Ethan continued, because you need to understand something about this house. About me. Nothing here is what it was supposed to be. My wife was supposed to live. Sophie was supposed to have a mother. I was supposed to be someone different. Better. But life doesn't work that way. Plans fail. People die. And what you're left with is just survival. That sounds lonely. It is. He said it without self-pity. Just fact. Which is why I need you to understand the rules. This arrangement works because we both know what it is. Business. Survival. Nothing more. Sophie is already attached to you. I saw it today. That's fine. She needs someone besides me. But you and I, we're not friends. We're not confidants. We're business partners sharing a house. That's all. Clara crossed her arms. You said all that already. In the study. When I signed the papers. I'm saying it again because I saw how you looked at me during the wedding, like you expected something. I didn't expect anything. Good. Keep it that way. He turned to leave, paused at the door. Margaret will bring you breakfast tomorrow at 8. We have a charity event tomorrow night. I'll have a dress sent up. Wear it. Smile. Play the part. That's all I need from you. He left. Clara stood alone in the room that was supposed to be a nursery and thought about her father's letter. About the boy running through a garden at midnight looking for someone to save him. Ethan Calloway wasn't that boy anymore. He'd built walls so high and so thick that Clara couldn't see any way through them. But maybe, she thought, looking out at her father's roses blooming in the darkness, maybe she wasn't supposed to go through them. Maybe she was supposed to wait, see what happened when the walls started cracking on their own. Black. The charity gala was a nightmare dressed in designer clothing. The dress Ethan sent was beautiful, deep blue silk that fit perfectly despite him never asking her size. Shoes that probably cost more than her car had been worth. Jewelry that Margaret helped her put on with gentle hands and knowing smiles. You look lovely, dear, Margaret said, fastening the diamond necklace. Mr. Calloway will be pleased. Clara doubted that. Ethan didn't seem like a man who was ever pleased with anything. He proved her right when he saw her. They met in the foyer at 7. He was in a tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread, perfectly composed, perfectly cold. His eyes swept over her once. That works. Let's go. No compliment. No smile. Just assessment and dismissal. The gala was at some hotel in Providence, one of Ethan's, Clara realized when she saw the Calloway Hotel's logo everywhere. Hundreds of people in expensive clothes drinking expensive champagne and pretending to care about whatever charity this was supposedly supporting. Ethan's hand settled on her lower back as they entered. A possessive touch that looked affectionate from the outside but felt purely performative. Smile, he murmured. Look like you're happy to be here. Clara smiled, felt her face muscles ache with the effort. They made rounds. Ethan introduced her to people whose names she immediately forgot. Business partners, politicians, society wives who looked at Clara like they were trying to figure out how she'd managed to snag one of Providence's most eligible bachelors. It's so wonderful to see Ethan happy again, one woman said, air-kissing Clara's cheeks. After dear Catherine passed, we were all so worried. But love finds a way, doesn't it? Something like that, Clara said. Ethan's hand tightened on her back. Warning. They moved on. More introductions, more fake smiles, more questions about how they met, through her father, which was technically true, and when the wedding was small ceremony private, which was definitely true, and whether they were thinking about more children, no comment, delivered with Ethan's coldest smile. Clara excused herself to the bathroom after an hour, locked herself in a stall, and tried to remember how to breathe. This was her life now, performing, pretending, playing a role in a play she didn't understand for an audience that didn't care. She heard voices at the sinks, women, laughing. Did you see his wife? She's so ordinary. I give it 6 months. Ethan Calloway isn't the type to stay married to a nobody waitress. Maybe that's the point. Someone grateful. Someone who won't ask questions. Someone who knows her place. More laughter. Clara sat in the stall and stared at the expensive tile floor and felt absolutely nothing. She'd been called worse. By customers. By her landlord. By the voice in her own head at 3 a.m. when she couldn't pay rent. This was just more of the same. She fixed her makeup, went back out. Found Ethan exactly where she'd left him, talking to a group of men about hotel expansion into Asia. His eyes found her immediately, swept over her face like he was checking for damage. Gentlemen, excuse me, he said smoothly. My wife looks like she could use some air. He guided her outside to a terrace overlooking the city. The night air was cool. Welcome. What happened? He said. Not a question. Nothing. Clara, I heard some women in the bathroom talking about us, about me. It's fine. His jaw tightened. What did they say? Does it matter? Yes. Clara looked at him, really looked. Saw anger there, carefully controlled but definitely present. Why do you care what they said? I'm just the hired help. The business partner, remember? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Tell me what they said. They said I was ordinary, that you'd leave me in 6 months, that I'm just here because I'm grateful and won't ask questions. She smiled without humor. They're not wrong. They're completely wrong. Which part? Ethan stepped closer. Too close. Close enough that Clara could smell his cologne, see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes. All of it. You're not ordinary, and this arrangement has nothing to do with gratitude or silence. Your father asked me to take care of you. That's what I'm doing. What other people think about it is irrelevant. Then why are we here? Why put on this whole show if you don't care what people think? Because appearances matter in my world. Like it or not, people judge. Investors get nervous. Business partners wonder about stability. I can't afford questions about my personal life when I'm trying to close deals worth millions of dollars. So I'm a prop. You're part of the image I need to maintain. He said it bluntly, honestly. I won't apologize for that. You knew what this was when you signed the contract. Clara laughed, actually laughed. You're right, I did. I guess I just didn't expect it to feel quite this depressing. For a moment, Ethan looked like he might say something. His mouth opened, closed, then the mask slammed back down. We'll leave in an hour, he said. Think you can make it through another hour of smiling? I've survived worse. I'm sure you have. They went back inside. Clara smiled until her face hurt and made small talk until her voice went hoarse and pretended she didn't notice the way Ethan's hand stayed on her back all night, like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. The drive home was silent. Clara stared out the window and watched the city lights fade to darkness. Ethan sat beside her, typing on his phone, completely focused on work. When they reached the estate, Clara climbed out without waiting for the driver, kicked off her expensive shoes in the foyer, and walked barefoot toward her room. Clara! She stopped, didn't turn around. You did well tonight, Ethan said behind her. Thank you. Clara closed her eyes. You're welcome. She went to her room, changed into pajamas, stood at the window looking at her father's roses, and wondered how long she could keep doing this. Keep pretending, keep smiling, keep living in this beautiful, cold house with a man who looked at her like she was a problem to be managed. A soft knock on the door. For a second, she thought it might be Ethan. Thought maybe he'd come to apologize for being an emotionless wall, or to acknowledge that this was harder than either of them expected. But it was Sophie, in princess pajamas, clutching a stuffed rabbit, eyes wide and scared. I had a bad dream, she whispered. Clara's heart melted. She opened the door wider. Come here, sweetheart. Sophie ran to her. Clara picked her up. She was so small, so light, and carried her to the bed. Want to tell me about it? Sophie shook her head against Clara's shoulder. That's okay. We don't have to talk about it. Clara lay down, kept Sophie close. Want me to tell you a story instead? A nod. So Clara told her a story about a princess who lived in a castle by the sea and had a magic garden where the roses bloomed all year round. She made it up as she went, and Sophie's breathing gradually slowed, evened out, until she was asleep against Clara's side. Clara should have taken her back to her own room, should have called Margaret or someone, should have followed whatever protocol Ethan had for his daughter's nightmares. Instead, she just held her, stared at the ceiling, listened to the ocean beyond the windows. And when Ethan appeared in her doorway 20 minutes later, clearly looking for his daughter, Clara saw something on his face that wasn't ice or control or careful distance. It was longing, raw and painful, and quickly hidden. She had a nightmare, Clara whispered. I hope that's okay. Ethan stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he nodded. Thank you. He left. But Clara caught it. The crack in his voice. The way his hands had clenched at his sides when he saw his daughter sleeping peacefully in someone else's arms. This man wasn't ice. He was burning himself alive trying to stay cold. And Clara's father had sent her here knowing exactly that. End of part 1. The nightmares became a pattern. 3 nights a week, sometimes 4, Sophie would appear at Clara's door with her stuffed rabbit and those huge, scared eyes. Clara never asked what the dreams were about. She'd just open the door, let the little girl crawl into bed beside her, and tell stories until Sophie's breathing evened out into sleep. Ethan never came looking for his daughter anymore. He knew where to find her. The days fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal if Clara didn't think about it too hard. Breakfast alone in her room because Ethan left for the office before 7. Mornings in the rose garden, learning the names of every bush her father had planted, touching the same soil he'd touched 23 years ago. Afternoons with Sophie, tea parties and books, and long walks on the beach below the estate where Sophie would collect shells and Clara would try to remember what it felt like to be 5 years old and believe in magic. Evenings were harder. That's when Ethan came home. He'd appear in the library around 6, pour himself a drink, and work through dinner unless there was an event they needed to attend. Sometimes Sophie would run to him, and Clara would watch his whole body language shift, the walls coming down just enough to let his daughter through. He'd read to her before bed, his deep voice carrying through the halls, telling stories about dragons and knights that made Sophie giggle. Then he'd retreat, back to his study, back to his work, back behind those walls that Clara was starting to understand weren't just about her. They were about everyone, everything, the whole damn world. "He's always been like this," Margaret said one afternoon while Clara helped her fold laundry. It was strange. Clara had a contract that said she was Ethan's wife, but she felt more comfortable in the laundry room with Margaret than anywhere else in this mansion. Even before Catherine died, controlled, private, but he was softer then. She brought something out in him. Clara smoothed down one of Sophie's tiny shirts. What was she like? Margaret smiled, but it was sad around the edges. Beautiful, kind. Too kind, maybe. She saw the best in everyone, including Ethan. When she got sick, he threw everything he had at trying to save her. Best doctors, experimental treatments, things I don't even understand. But cancer doesn't care how much money you have. Sophie doesn't remember her at all, does she? Bits and pieces? Mostly just what Ethan tells her. Margaret paused, folding a towel with precise corners. He keeps Catherine's room exactly as it was. Won't let anyone clean it properly. Just dusts it himself once a week. Clara looked up sharply. He what? 3rd floor, west wing. The door's always locked, but I've seen him go in there late at night when he thinks no one's watching. Margaret met Clara's eyes. That man is drowning, dear. Has been for years. He just does it so quietly that most people don't notice. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Ethan alone in a dead woman's room, dusting furniture like he could keep her alive through sheer force of will. About a 9-year-old boy running through a garden looking for someone to save him. About walls built so high that even love couldn't find a way through. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and went downstairs to the library. Maybe a book would quiet her mind. Maybe she'd just sit there until exhaustion won. She found Ethan at the desk, head in his hands, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. He looked up when she entered. Can't sleep? Apparently not. Clara hovered in the doorway, suddenly aware she was in pajamas, old cotton ones, not the silk things Margaret kept trying to convince her to wear. I can leave if you want to be alone. It's your house too. He said it mechanically, like he'd practiced the phrase. Contract says you have access to all common areas. Right. The contract. Clara moved into the room, running her fingers along the book spines. You know, most married people don't constantly reference the legal documents governing their relationship. Most married people actually like each other. Do you dislike me? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with those gray eyes that missed nothing. No. That's something, I guess. Clara, it's fine. I'm not asking you to like me. I'm just saying that maybe we could occasionally have a conversation that doesn't involve reminding each other, this is all fake. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, moved to the small bar cart, and poured 2 drinks, handed her one. What do you want to talk about? Clara took the glass. Whiskey. Good stuff, she could tell just from the smell. Tell me about the garden. Not the corporate answer about it being a nice garden. The real answer. I gave you the real answer. You gave me part of it. Clara sat in the leather chair across from his desk, curling her legs under her. My father designed that garden 23 years ago when you were 9. But you've maintained it all this time, changed nothing. There are roses out there that have to be at least 15, 20 years old. Someone's been caring for them. Ethan returned to his desk but didn't sit. Just stood there, drink in hand, looking at her like he was trying to decide something. I care for them myself. You do? Every Sunday morning, 5 a.m., before anyone else is awake. Clara felt something shift in her chest. Why? Because your father showed me that growing things doesn't have to be about control or perfection. It can just be about patience, care, showing up even when you don't see immediate results. He took a drink. I was 9 years old and I'd spent my entire life in a house where everything was about appearances and punishment and staying quiet. Then I met this man who was on his knees in the dirt at midnight, planting roses like it was the most important thing in the world. And when I asked him why he worked so late, he said it was because roses don't judge you. They just grow if you take care of them. Clara's throat tightened. That sounded exactly like something her father would say. He found me hiding in the garden that night, Ethan continued. My stepmother had locked me in a closet for 6 hours because I'd spilled juice at breakfast. I'd finally gotten out, run outside, and I was just sitting there in the dark trying to figure out how to survive until I was old enough to leave. Then Thomas found me. What did he do? He sat down next to me, didn't say anything for the longest time, just sat there. Then he started telling me about the roses he was planting, what each color meant, how you had to be patient because they'd look like nothing for months, maybe years, but if you kept caring for them, eventually they'd bloom into something beautiful. Ethan's voice had gone quiet. Then he asked if I wanted to help, so we planted roses together until the sun came up. And for those few hours, I forgot about everything else. Clara set her drink down. Is that when you told him about what was happening? He didn't need me to tell him. He could see it, the bruises, the fear, the way I flinched at loud noises. Ethan finished his drink in one swallow. 2 weeks later, I ran. Found him in the garden again. Told him I couldn't go back inside that house. And he didn't hesitate. Just put me in his truck and drove me to my grandfather's estate in Boston. The old bastard hated my stepmother anyway. She'd only married my father for the money. When Thomas explained what was happening, my grandfather had me out of that house permanently within 48 hours. And your stepmother? Tried to have Thomas arrested for kidnapping. My grandfather made it all disappear. Money and lawyers can fix a lot of problems. His jaw tightened. But Thomas still lost his job, lost references. It took him months to find new work because my stepmother spread rumors about him being inappropriate with children. Nearly destroyed his life for helping me. Clara stood up, crossed to where Ethan stood by the window. He never told me any of this. I asked him not to. I was ashamed. Still am. He looked at her then, and Clara saw the 9-year-old boy underneath the billionaire armor. I repaid his kindness by ruining his life. And when he finally called in the debt 23 years later, I couldn't say no. Even though this whole arrangement probably feels like a prison to you. It doesn't feel like a prison. Don't lie to be kind. I'm not lying. Clara moved closer, close enough to smell the whiskey on his breath, see the exhaustion carved into his face. It's strange, and it's not what I imagined my life would be, but it's not a prison. Sophie is the best part of my day. Margaret makes me feel more at home here than I ever felt in my apartment. And you? She stopped, wasn't sure how to finish that sentence. I what? Ethan's voice had dropped lower. You're not as cold as you want everyone to believe you are. You barely know me. I know you take care of my father's roses at 5 a.m. every Sunday. I know you read bedtime stories to your daughter in different voices that make her laugh. I know you kept Catherine's room exactly the same because you can't let go. I know you're drowning, and you're too proud to ask for help. Ethan's expression shuddered. Margaret talks too much. Margaret cares about you. She shouldn't. Too late. They stood there in the lamplight, too close, the air between them charged with something Clara didn't want to name. Ethan's eyes searched her face like he was looking for something he'd lost. Then he stepped back. The walls slammed into place. It's late, he said. You should get some sleep. Clara recognized a dismissal when she heard one. Right. Good night, Ethan. She made it to the door before his voice stopped her. Clara. She turned. Thank you for being good to Sophie. She hasn't been this happy in a long time. It wasn't much, but coming from Ethan Calloway, it felt like everything. Claire went back to her room and lay awake for another hour, thinking about a man who tended roses at dawn and kept a dead woman's room like a shrine and read bedtime stories in silly voices. Thinking about walls that might not be as solid as they appeared. Thinking about her father's letter. Don't let him convince you he's just ice and business deals. The weeks turned into months. Fall arrived, painting the coastal landscape in amber and rust. The roses in the garden began their slow fade toward winter dormancy, though some of the hardier varieties still bloomed stubbornly against the cold. Clara's life developed a routine that felt less like performance and more like actual living. She'd started taking online classes, business management, because why not actually learn something useful? She volunteered at Sophie's school twice a week, helping in the library, and the other mothers had stopped looking at her like she was an alien. Some of them were even friendly. And Ethan was still Ethan, controlled, private, impossible to read most of the time. But there were cracks now, small ones. Like the morning Clara came down to breakfast early and found him at the kitchen table with Sophie, both of them covered in pancake batter because Sophie had insisted on helping. He'd looked up at Clara with something close to embarrassment, and Sophie had shrieked with laughter, and for just a moment they'd looked like an actual family. Or the charity gala where some drunk investor had grabbed Clara's arm too hard and made a suggestion that was definitely not appropriate, and Ethan had appeared out of nowhere with murder in his eyes. He'd removed the man's hand with enough force to make the guy yelp, said something in a voice too low for Clara to hear, and the investor had gone pale and left the event entirely. Ethan hadn't mentioned it, just guided Clara back into the crowd with his hand protective on her back. Or the Sunday morning she'd woken up at 5 and decided to join Ethan in the garden. She'd found him there, exactly like she'd imagined, on his knees in the dirt in old jeans and a work shirt, carefully pruning back the roses for winter. He'd looked up when she approached, surprise crossing his face. "Couldn't sleep?" he'd asked. "Wanted to help." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." So he'd shown her how to prune properly, where to cut, which branches to save. They'd worked side by side in the gray dawn light, and Ethan had talked about the roses like other people talked about their children, with pride and careful attention and genuine affection. He'd shown her the original white rose bush her father had planted first, explained how everything else in the garden was descended from that original stock. "Your father believed in legacy," Ethan had said, running his fingers over the thorny stems. "He said these roses would outlive both of us if we took care of them properly. I didn't understand what he meant back then. I was 9. I thought he was just talking about plants." "What do you think he meant?" Clara had asked. Ethan had looked at her then, and something in his expression had made her breath catch. "I think he meant that the things we build together last longer than the things we build alone." After that morning, Clara joined him every Sunday. Neither of them acknowledged it as a standing arrangement. She'd just appear at 5 a.m., and he'd hand her gloves and pruning shears, and they'd work until the sun came up. They talked about everything and nothing. Her father's other gardens, the ones he'd designed around Providence before he got sick. Ethan's expansion plans for the hotel empire. Sophie's reading level, which was apparently advanced for her age. The weather, the ocean. The way the light hit the roses differently depending on the season. They didn't talk about Catherine. Didn't talk about the contract. Didn't talk about the thing that was growing between them in the spaces neither of them wanted to acknowledge. But it was there. Clara felt it every time Ethan's hand brushed hers passing tools. Every time he smiled at something she said, real smiles now, not the corporate ones he used at galas. Every time she caught him watching her play with Sophie, his expression unguarded for just a moment before the walls came back up. Margaret noticed. Clara could tell from the knowing looks, the way she'd smile when she found them in the library, talking late into the night. Even Sophie noticed, asking Clara one day if Daddy was happy now. "I think so, sweetheart." "Why?" "He smiles more. And he doesn't lock himself in his study as much." Sophie had looked up at Clara with those serious eyes. "I think it's because you're here." Clara's heart had twisted. "Your daddy has always loved you, Sophie. That hasn't changed. I know, but he was sad before. Now he's not as sad." Clara had pulled Sophie into a hug and tried not to think about what it meant that Ethan Calloway's daughter could see what he was trying so hard to hide. November arrived cold and gray. The charity circuit slowed down as everyone prepared for the holidays, which meant fewer events, fewer performances, fewer nights watching Ethan smile at strangers while his hand on Clara's back stayed carefully neutral. Instead, they had quiet dinners. The three of them, Clara, Ethan, and Sophie, eating together in the smaller dining room rather than the formal one. Sophie would chatter about school, and Ethan would ask questions that showed he actually listened when his daughter talked. Clara would watch them and feel the hollow space in her chest where her father used to be ache a little less. One night after Sophie went to bed, Ethan didn't disappear to his study. He stayed in the living room where Clara was reading, poured himself a drink, and sat in the chair across from her. "Can I ask you something?" he said. Clara looked up from her book. "Sure." "Do you ever regret it? Saying yes to all this?" The question surprised her. Ethan wasn't the type to ask for reassurance. "Sometimes," she said honestly, "when it feels too big or too strange, or when I remember that I'm only here because my father died and left me with nothing. But mostly, no, I don't regret it." "Why not?" Clara set her book down. "Because I was drowning before I came here, working 2 jobs, eating ramen for dinner, waking up every morning knowing I'd failed my father. At least here, I'm useful. Sophie needs me. Margaret likes having someone to fuss over. And you—" "I what?" "You need someone around who doesn't expect you to be perfect all the time." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't need anything." "Everyone needs something, Ethan. Not me." "Right. That's why you lock yourself in a dead woman's room every week. That's why you work 18-hour days. That's why you've built walls so high that your own daughter asked me if you were happy now because she couldn't tell before." Clara stood up. "You can lie to everyone else, but don't lie to me. I live here. I see you." Ethan stood too, anger flashing in his eyes. "You see what you want to see. I see a man who's scared to death of being vulnerable because the last time you let someone in, she died and left you alone with a baby and more grief than any person should have to carry. Don't talk about Catherine. Why not? She existed. She was your wife, Sophie's mother. Pretending she didn't happen doesn't make the grief go away. I'm not pretending anything. You keep her room like a museum, Ethan. That's not moving forward. That's being stuck." His expression turned dangerous. "You've been here 4 months. Don't presume to tell me how to grieve." "I'm not telling you how to grieve. I'm telling you that at some point you have to actually live again instead of just surviving. Like you're one to talk. You came here because you had nowhere else to go. You signed a contract to marry a stranger because your father told you to. You're just as stuck as I am." The words hit harder than Clara expected, because he wasn't wrong. She'd been treading water her whole life, and coming here was just a different kind of drowning. "You're right," she said quietly. "I am stuck. I've been stuck since my mother left, since my father got sick, since I realized I'd spent my entire 20s waiting tables and watching my life go nowhere. But at least I'm trying to find a way forward. What are you doing besides hiding?" Ethan moved toward her, and Clara saw the 9-year-old boy again, the one who'd run through a garden looking for someone to save him. "I'm protecting my daughter. I'm building a company that will support her for the rest of her life. I'm making sure she never has to depend on anyone the way I depended on people who hurt me. By teaching her that love means loss and vulnerability means pain. By teaching her to be strong. She's 5 years old. She doesn't need to be strong. She needs to be loved. I do love her. I know you do. But love isn't just protection, Ethan. It's not just security and trust funds and making sure nothing bad ever happens. It's showing up, being present, letting her see that it's okay to need people." "Like her mother needed me?" His voice cracked. "Catherine needed me, and I couldn't save her. I threw everything I had at trying to keep her alive, and she died anyway. So forgive me if I don't buy into the whole love conquers all philosophy." Clara's anger drained away. She saw him clearly then, not the billionaire, not the ice-cold businessman, but the man who'd watched his wife die and blamed himself for not being enough to keep her alive. "It wasn't your fault," she said softly. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Cancer doesn't care how much money you have or how much you love someone. It just is. I should have found better doctors, better treatments. You did everything you could, and it still wasn't enough. That's not failure, Ethan. That's just life being cruel and unfair and horrible." He turned away from her, shoulders rigid. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I can't go through that again. Caring about someone that much, needing them, then watching them disappear." Clara understood then, really understood. "That's why you keep everyone at arm's length. Why you made this arrangement so clinical. You're not protecting me or Sophie from getting attached to someone who's going to leave. You're protecting yourself. Ethan didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. Clara crossed the room, put her hand on his shoulder, felt him tense under her touch, but didn't pull away. "I'm not Catherine," she said, "and I'm not asking you to love me or need me or anything else that scares you, but we live in the same house. We're raising your daughter together. At some point, you're going to have to decide if you can trust me enough to be your friend, not your contract wife, not the hired help, just your friend." Ethan turned to face her. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. "I don't know how to do that." "Neither do I, but maybe we could figure it out together." For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then, slowly, he nodded. It wasn't a declaration, it wasn't a breakthrough, but it was something. Clara went to bed that night feeling like she'd crossed a bridge she hadn't known existed, like maybe, possibly, the walls were starting to crack. 2 weeks later, the storm hit. It came out of nowhere, one of those late autumn nor'easters that the Weather Service had predicted would miss Newport entirely. Instead, it slammed into the coast with a fury that reminded everyone why people used to fear the ocean. Ethan had taken Sophie to his grandfather's house in Boston for the weekend, some family obligation Clara had been excused from. She'd planned to enjoy the quiet, maybe catch up on her coursework, definitely sleep in past 5 a.m. for once. Then, at noon, her phone rang. Ethan's name on the screen. "Clara, are you at the house?" "Yeah, why?" "The storm changed direction. It's going to be bad. Margaret and the staff are leaving now. I already told her to go, but I need you to do something for me." Clara moved to the window. The sky had gone an ominous gray-green. "What?" "There's a folder in my study, top right desk drawer. It has Sophie's medical records, insurance information, legal documents. I need you to get it and take it to the old cabin on the north side of the property. It's stone construction built in the 1800s. It'll be safer than the main house if this thing is as bad as they're saying." "Ethan, I'm not leaving the house to go to some cabin for a folder. Clara, please." His voice was tight, scared. That house was built for beauty, not durability. If the storm surge gets bad enough, the whole lower level could flood. The cabin is on higher ground. It's where we keep emergency supplies. Just go there, lock yourself in, and wait it out. I'm trying to get back, but they've already closed the highway. Clara's stomach dropped. "How bad is this going to be?" "Bad enough that I need to know you're somewhere safe. Please, Clara. Just do this for me." She heard Sophie crying in the background, heard Ethan's voice gentle as he spoke to his daughter, telling her everything would be okay. "Okay," Clara said. "I'll get the folder and go to the cabin. Thank you." A pause. "And Clara, there's a ham radio in the cabin, channel 7. I'll try to reach you once the storm passes." He hung up. Clara grabbed her phone charger, threw some clothes in a bag, and went to Ethan's study. Found the folder exactly where he said it would be. As she was leaving, she saw his jacket hanging on the back of his chair. On impulse, she grabbed it. The wind was already picking up as she made her way across the estate toward the north property. She could see Margaret's car disappearing down the driveway, and the other staff vehicles following. The ocean beyond the cliffs had turned choppy and dark, waves building to heights that looked wrong. The cabin appeared through the trees, small, stone, exactly like Ethan had described. Clara let herself in with the key he'd told her to find under the third stone to the left of the door. Inside was basic but functional. Single room with a wood stove, cots, shelves stocked with canned food and water, battery-powered lanterns, and a ham radio on a wooden table by the window. Clara locked the door, lit the lanterns as the day grew darker, and settled in to wait. The storm hit around 3 p.m. Clara had been through hurricanes before, living in Providence, but this felt different, more violent. The wind screamed against the stone walls, and rain hammered the roof so hard it sounded like gunfire. Lightning split the sky in jagged white lines, followed by thunder that shook the cabin's foundations. Clara tried the ham radio, nothing but static. She ate a can of soup cold, wrapped herself in Ethan's jacket because the temperature had dropped, and tried not to think about the main house, about whether it was flooding, about whether she should have stayed to protect something. Around 8 p.m., the radio crackled to life. "Clara? Clara, can you hear me?" Ethan's voice, distorted by static, but definitely him. Clara grabbed the receiver. "I'm here. I'm okay." "Thank God." He sounded wrecked. "The cabin holding up?" "Yeah, it's solid. How's Sophie?" Scared but safe. My grandfather's house is built like a fortress. A pause. I tried to get back. They won't let anyone on the roads. I know. It's okay. Is it cold there? Did you find the emergency supplies? I'm wearing your jacket, actually. Hope that's okay. A sound that might have been a laugh. Keep it. Looks better on you anyway. Clara smiled despite everything. You can't even see me. Don't need to. The radio crackled. Clara waited for it to clear. Clara, you still there? Still here. I need you to know something. His voice had changed. Quieter. More raw. If anything happens, nothing's going to happen. Just let me say this. Please. He took a breath she could hear even through the static. I've spent the last 6 years building walls to protect myself from ever feeling the way I felt when Catherine died. And it worked. I was safe. Numb, but safe. Then you showed up and you didn't respect the walls at all. You just walked right through them, like they weren't even there. Claire's throat tightened. Ethan, I'm not good at this. At talking about feelings or being vulnerable or any of the things you're trying to teach me. But sitting here, not knowing if you're okay, not being able to get to you, it's the most terrified I've been since the night Catherine died. And I need you to know that. Lightning flashed. Thunder followed immediately. Too close. I need you to know, Ethan continued, that this stopped being just a contract for me somewhere along the way. I don't know when. Maybe that first morning you showed up in the garden at 5 a.m. Maybe when I saw you reading to Sophie. Maybe the night you called me out for hiding in Catherine's room. But it stopped being fake, and I'm scared to death of what that means. Clara pressed her hand against the cold stone wall, felt tears on her face. It stopped being fake for me too. Silence. Just the crackle of the radio and the roar of the storm. When I get back, Ethan started. The radio died. Just static. Clara tried adjusting the frequency, tried calling out. Nothing. She was alone again, but not really alone. Because Ethan Calloway had just cracked himself open over a ham radio during a nor'easter, and Clara had heard every word. She wrapped his jacket tighter around herself and waited for the storm to pass. The wind screamed all night. Clara dozed fitfully on one of the cots, jolting awake every time something hit the cabin. Branches, debris, things she didn't want to identify. The lanterns cast dancing shadows on the stone walls, and she thought about Ethan taking care of roses at dawn, about Sophie sleeping peacefully in her arms after nightmares, about her father's letter. Maybe, just maybe, you'll both find what you've been missing. The storm finally broke around dawn. The wind died. The rain stopped. Clara opened the cabin door to a world transformed. Trees down everywhere, the landscape littered with branches and leaves and pieces of things that had been whole yesterday. She made her way back to the main house through the destruction. The house had survived, but barely. Windows blown out on the ocean side, water damage throughout the first floor. The rose garden was devastated, bushes uprooted, petals stripped and scattered across mud and debris. Claire stood in the ruins of her father's garden and cried. Then she heard the car. Ethan appeared through the gates, driving too fast, Sophie in the back seat with her stuffed rabbit. He was out of the car before it fully stopped, running toward Clara. He didn't say anything, just pulled her into his arms and held on like she might disappear if he let go. Sophie ran up too, grabbing onto both of them. You're okay. Daddy was so worried. He didn't sleep at all. Clara looked at Ethan over Sophie's head, saw everything he'd said over the radio reflected in his eyes. The fear, the relief, the feelings he didn't know how to name. The garden, she whispered. I don't care about the garden. His voice was rough. You're safe. That's all that matters. But my father's roses can be replanted, rebuilt. But you... He pulled back just enough to look at her properly. I can't rebuild you. Sophie looked between them, confusion and hope on her small face. Are you going to kiss? Daddy kissed Mommy Catherine all the time. I've seen pictures. Ethan's jaw worked. Clara saw him wrestling with himself, with the walls he'd spent years building, with the terror of letting someone in. Then he made a choice. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate and fierce, and tasted like 6 years of grief meeting 4 months of hope. Clara kissed him back and felt something fundamental shift in the universe. When they broke apart, Sophie was grinning. Does this mean Clara's my real mommy now? Ethan looked at Clara. Clara looked at Ethan. I think, Clara said carefully, it means we need to have a really long conversation about what happens next. But later. Right now, standing in the ruins of a garden that would bloom again, with a man who'd finally let his walls crack and a little girl who deserved to believe in love, Clara just let herself feel happy. That conversation didn't happen for 3 days. First came the cleanup. Insurance adjusters trudging through water-damaged rooms, making notes on clipboards and taking photos of ruined furniture. Contractors assessing structural damage, talking about timelines and permits and costs that made even Ethan wince. And the garden, what was left of it, looking like a battlefield. Clara spent those 3 days working alongside the landscaping crew Ethan hired, trying to salvage what they could. Some of the older rose bushes had survived, their roots deep enough to weather the storm. Others were complete losses, ripped from the ground entirely. She found the original white rose bush, her father's first planting, lying on its side, half the root system exposed. This one we can save, the head landscaper said, a weathered man named Joe who'd worked for the Callaways for 15 years. It'll take time, but the main taproot is intact. Clara knelt in the mud beside it, running her fingers over the thorny branches. My father planted this 23 years ago. Joe nodded. Mr. Callaway told me he's been real particular about this garden over the years. Wouldn't let anyone touch it but himself most of the time. Must have meant something to him. It did, Clara said. It does. They worked until sunset, carefully repositioning the white rose, packing soil around its roots, staking it upright. Clara's hands were covered in scratches and dirt, her back aching, but she felt something like peace settling in her chest. This garden had survived worse than a storm. It would bloom again. When she came inside, exhausted and filthy, she found Ethan in the library with Sophie. He looked up as Clara entered, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or acknowledgement of the thing that had changed between them in the storm. You should shower, he said. Margaret left dinner in the kitchen. I'm helping Clara in the garden tomorrow, Sophie announced proudly. Daddy said I could. Ethan smiled. A real smile, the kind that made him look younger. I said you could help for 1 hour. Then you have homework. But gardens are more important than homework. Nice try, sweetheart. Clara watched them, this small domestic scene, and felt the future stretching out in front of her like an unmapped road. Terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. Later, after Sophie had gone to bed and Clara had showered off the day's dirt, she found Ethan still in the library. He'd poured 2 drinks, had clearly been waiting for her. So, he said as she sat down, we should probably talk. Clara took the offered glass. Probably. I meant what I said, during the storm, on the radio. I know. And you meant what you said back. I did. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I don't know how to do this, Clara, any of this. Since Catherine, I haven't let myself feel anything for anyone. And now you're here, and Sophie adores you, and I keep finding myself looking for you in rooms where you're not, and it scares the hell out of me. Clara set down her drink. You think it doesn't scare me? I came here because I had nowhere else to go. Because my father asked me to trust him one last time. And now I'm falling for a man who made it very clear this was supposed to be business only. And I have no idea if you're actually ready for this, or if you're going to panic and rebuild those walls the second things get difficult. That's fair. Is it because I need to know, Ethan, are we doing this, actually doing this? Or was that kiss just adrenaline and relief that I didn't die in a storm? He stood up, crossed to where she sat, and pulled her to her feet. His hands cupped her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. I don't know how to make promises about the future. I don't know if I'll be good at this or if I'll mess it up completely. But I know that when I thought I might lose you in that storm, it felt like losing Catherine all over again. And I know that I don't want to waste whatever time we have being scared of what might go wrong. Clara's breath caught. That's not nothing. It's all I've got. Then it's enough. He kissed her again, slower this time. Tender. Like he was memorizing the shape of her mouth, the taste of her. When they broke apart, Clara rested her forehead against his. We should probably tell Sophie something, she said. She's 5, not stupid. She knows something changed. What do we tell her? The truth? That we're figuring things out. That we care about each other. that nothing's going to change for her, except maybe her parents might actually like each other now. Ethan pulled back slightly. Parents. What? You said parents, plural. Clara's heart stuttered. I didn't mean, I'm not trying to replace Catherine. I would never. I know. His voice was gentle. But Sophie already sees you that way, as her mother. Maybe not Catherine, but hers nonetheless. And I think, he paused, choosing words carefully. I think Catherine would have liked that. She always said Sophie deserved to have love from more than just one person. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Tell me about her. Really tell me. Not the sanitized version. So they sat together in the library while the house settled around them, and Ethan talked about Catherine, about how they'd met at a charity auction where she'd accidentally bid on the same painting as him, and they'd ended up splitting it down the middle, literally cutting the canvas in half because Catherine thought it was hilarious. About how she'd gotten sick 3 months after Sophie was born and fought like hell for 2 years before the cancer won. About how she'd made him promise not to lock himself away after she died, and how he'd broken that promise the day they buried her. She'd be mad at me, Ethan said quietly, for hiding for so long, for making Sophie grow up with half a father. You're not half a father. You're a great dad. I'm trying to be. But I missed so much because I was scared. First steps, first words. I was there physically, but I wasn't present. Not really. I was just surviving. Clara took his hand. You're present now. That's what matters. They talked until past midnight, sharing pieces of themselves they'd kept hidden. Clara told him about her mother leaving, about growing up watching her father work himself to death trying to make up for being abandoned, about the shame of being 30 and broke and watching her father die knowing she couldn't do anything to stop it. Ethan told her about his stepmother, about the years of abuse that his father either didn't see or didn't care enough to stop, about the guilt of being saved when other kids in similar situations weren't, about building an empire partially out of talent and partially out of a desperate need to prove he was worth the rescue. By the time they finally said goodnight, Clara felt like she knew him, really knew him. Not the billionaire businessman or the grieving widower or the distant employer, just Ethan, broken and brilliant and trying his best. She slept better that night than she had in months. The next few weeks felt like waking up from a long sleep. Ethan worked from home more, arranging his schedule so he could have breakfast with Clara and Sophie. They started having actual conversations at dinner instead of the stilted small talk that had characterized their first months together. He'd take Clara's hand in public now, and it didn't feel like performance. It felt real. Sophie noticed immediately and blossomed under the attention. She started calling Clara Mama Clara without anyone telling her to, and Clara's heart broke and mended every single time she heard it. The garden slowly came back to life under their combined care. Clara and Ethan worked on it together now. Not just Sunday mornings, but whenever time allowed. Joe and his crew did the heavy lifting, but the detail work, the pruning, the feeding, the careful attention to each individual bush, that was theirs. Your father would be proud, Ethan said one afternoon as they worked side by side, of how you're bringing this back. Clara sat back on her heels, surveying their progress. I think he knew, somehow, that this was where I needed to be. He was a smart man. He was a romantic. There's a difference. Ethan smiled. Maybe there doesn't have to be. They were happy. For the first time in years, both of them were genuinely happy, which is exactly when everything fell apart. The invitation arrived in early December, delivered by courier in a cream envelope with embossed lettering. The annual Callaway Hotel's anniversary gala, celebrating 15 years since Ethan took over the company from his grandfather. Black tie. Newport's Elite. The biggest event of the social season. Do we have to go? Clara asked, holding the invitation like it might bite her. Ethan looked up from his laptop. It's my company's anniversary. Kind of have to make an appearance. I hate these things. I know, but this one's important. Investors, board members, major clients, everyone will be there. And it's the first major event since he gestured between them, since things changed. Clara understood what he wasn't saying. This would be their debut as a real couple, not just a contractual arrangement. People would be watching, judging, looking for cracks. Okay, she said, but you owe me. Name it. A week. Just us and Sophie, somewhere quiet. No business calls, no events, no performing. Ethan considered this. I have a place in Maine, small cottage on the coast. We could go for Christmas. Deal. The gala was 3 weeks away. Clara tried not to think about it, focusing instead on Sophie's upcoming school winter concert and helping Margaret plan the holiday decorations. But the event loomed larger as the date approached, a glittering obligation she couldn't escape. Margaret helped her pick out a dress, emerald green silk that made Clara feel like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. But when she tried it on and saw herself in the mirror, she had to admit it looked good. Like she belonged in Ethan's world, even if she didn't always feel like she did. The night of the gala, Clara stood in her room adjusting her necklace when Ethan knocked. He was in his tuxedo, looking unfairly handsome, and when he saw her, his eyes went dark. "You're beautiful," he said simply. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You clean up okay too." He crossed the room, pulled her close. "We don't have to stay long. Few hours, show face, then we're out of there. Promise?" "Promise." He kissed her forehead. "And Clara, I'm proud to have you with me tonight. I want you to know that." Those words carried her through the first hour of the event. Through the receiving line and the small talk and the barely concealed curiosity from people who'd known Ethan for years and had never seen him this relaxed with anyone since Catherine. The gala was being held at the flagship Callaway Hotel in downtown Newport, a historic property Ethan had renovated 5 years earlier. Everything was pristine: crystal chandeliers, marble floors, waiters gliding through crowds with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than Clara used to make in a week. Ethan kept her close, his hand on her back or holding hers, introducing her to everyone who mattered. Clara played her part, smiling and laughing in the right places, making conversation about nothing. But she could feel the weight of expectations, the unspoken questions. Who was she really? Where had she come from? What was her angle? Around 9 o'clock, Ethan excused himself to give the official anniversary speech. Clara watched from the crowd as he took the stage, commanding and confident, thanking everyone for their support and outlining the company's vision for the future. He was good at this, born for it maybe. And Clara felt a surge of pride watching him, this complicated man who'd let her past his walls. Then she noticed the woman, standing near the back of the ballroom, watching Ethan with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. She was older, maybe 60, impeccably dressed in black, with sharp features and eyes that looked like they missed nothing. Something about her made Clara's skin crawl. The speech ended to applause. Ethan returned to Clara's side, and she meant to mention the woman, but then a board member pulled him into conversation, and the moment passed. They made it through dinner, 8 courses of food Clara barely tasted, more champagne than she should have drunk. Dancing, which Ethan was surprisingly good at, pulling Clara close and whispering things in her ear that made her laugh. For a while she forgot about the woman in black. Then came the anniversary toast. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Ethan was supposed to give a brief thank you and lead everyone in raising glasses to the company's success. Instead, he stood there in the light, and Clara saw something shift in his expression, a hardness creeping back in, the walls slamming into place. 15 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom, my grandfather gave me control of this company. He took a chance on a 20-year-old kid with more ambition than sense. Some of you thought he was crazy. Some of you are probably still waiting for me to fail. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. But I didn't fail. We didn't fail. Because I learned early that success in business requires the same thing success in life requires: discipline, control, and the ability to keep emotion out of decision-making. Clara's stomach dropped. She knew that tone. That was the voice Ethan used when he was retreating, protecting himself. Which brings me to something I need to address publicly, Ethan continued. Many of you have met my wife, Clara, tonight, and I've seen the speculation in your eyes, heard the whispers. So let me be clear about what this marriage is and isn't. No, Clara's hands went cold. No, he wasn't doing this. This marriage is a contractual arrangement, Ethan said, his voice flat and emotionless. Entered into for practical reasons on both sides. Clara needed financial stability. I needed the appearance of a traditional family structure for business purposes. That's all this is. A mutually beneficial arrangement. Nothing more. The ballroom went dead silent. Clara felt every eye turn to her. I'm telling you this, Ethan continued, Because I won't have rumors or speculation affecting business relationships. Transparency is important. And the truth is, I don't do romance. I don't do love. Those are luxuries I can't afford. What I do is business. And this marriage is business. He raised his glass. To 15 more years of success. The crowd slowly, awkwardly raised their glasses. But people were staring at Clara now, some with pity, some with barely concealed satisfaction. The whispers started immediately. Clara stood frozen, unable to breathe. This wasn't happening. After everything, after the storm, after the conversations, after he'd kissed her and told her he was done being scared, he was doing this? Ethan stepped off the stage, his face an unreadable mask. Clara met him at the bottom of the stairs. What the hell was that? Her voice shook. Necessary. He wouldn't look at her. Necessary? You just humiliated me in front of hundreds of people. I told the truth. That stopped being the truth weeks ago, and you know it. Finally, he looked at her, and Clara saw nothing there. Just ice, just walls rebuilt higher than before. I made a mistake, got caught up in something that shouldn't have happened. This is me correcting that mistake. Clara felt like he'd punched her. You're lying. I'm being realistic. You're being a coward. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people. You felt something real, and it scared you, so you're running, just like you've been running for 6 years. Clara, she pulled off her wedding ring, the simple platinum band he'd put on her finger in his study 7 months ago, held it out to him. If this is just business, then we're done. I'm not staying in that house, in that marriage, playing a part in your life when you just told everyone here that I mean nothing to you. Ethan stared at the ring, didn't take it. Where will you go? Anywhere but here. Clara set the ring on the table beside them, turned and walked through the silent crowd toward the exit. Every step felt like walking through fire, but she kept her head up, her shoulders back. She made it outside before the tears came. The valet brought her car, technically Ethan's car, one he'd insisted she use, but she didn't care about property rights right now. She drove through the rain that had started falling, her vision blurred by tears and fury and heartbreak so acute it felt physical. She should have known. Should have known that Ethan Calloway would never actually let anyone in, that the walls would always win. Her father had been wrong. This wasn't where she was supposed to be. She drove to her father's cottage, the small house on the coast where she'd grown up, the one Ethan's lawyers had saved from foreclosure as part of their contract. It was empty now, cold and dark, but it was hers. The only thing in this world that was truly hers. Clara let herself inside and collapsed on the worn couch where she'd spent countless nights as a kid, watching her father fall asleep reading. She pulled a blanket around herself and finally let herself fall apart. She cried for her father, who thought he was sending her to safety. Cried for Sophie, who didn't deserve to lose another mother figure. Cried for Ethan, who was so damaged he'd rather destroy everything good in his life than risk being hurt again. And she cried for herself, for being stupid enough to fall for a man who'd told her from the beginning he was incapable of love. Her phone buzzed, Ethan's name on the screen. She ignored it. It buzzed again, and again, and again. Finally, she turned it off entirely. She fell asleep on the couch as dawn broke, exhausted and empty. When she woke, it was to someone pounding on the door. Clara stumbled to answer it, expecting Margaret or maybe Ethan's lawyer coming to discuss the dissolution of their contract. Instead, she found Ethan. He looked like hell. Still in his tuxedo from the gala, but rumpled now, hair a mess, eyes red-rimmed and wild. He had a folder in his hand and desperation written all over his face. "Don't slam the door," he said before she could speak. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." Clara wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him to go to hell and never come back, but he looked so broken standing there that she stepped aside and let him in. Ethan entered the cottage, looking around like he'd never seen it before. Maybe he hadn't. It was small and shabby and nothing like his mansion, but it was real, honest. "Talk fast," Clara said, crossing her arms. "You've got 4 minutes left." "I lied last night." The words came out in a rush. "Everything I said at that gala was a lie, and I need you to understand why." He opened the folder, pulled out a photograph, handed it to Clara. It showed a woman, the same woman Clara had noticed watching Ethan during his speech. Sharp features, cold eyes. Her name is Vivian Holloway, Ethan said. My stepmother. The woman who locked me in closets and burned my arms with cigarettes and told me daily that I was worthless and deserved everything she did to me. Clara's blood went cold. Your stepmother, the one my father, saved me from. Yes. Ethan's hand shook as he took the photo back. She went to prison 8 years ago. Embezzlement, fraud, a dozen other charges. She was supposed to be in there for 20 more years. But 3 weeks ago, she was released early. Good behavior. And 2 days ago, my security team informed me that she's been in Newport. Watching the house, watching Sophie, watching you. Clara sank onto the couch. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was trying to protect you. I thought if I made it publicly clear that our marriage meant nothing to me, that you were just a business arrangement, she'd leave you alone, that she'd see you weren't important enough to target. Target? Ethan, what? Vivian is insane, Clara. Genuinely, dangerously insane. She blamed me for her arrest, for losing everything. My grandfather testified against her at her trial. And before she went to prison, she told me she'd make me pay, that she'd destroy everything I loved. He sat down beside her, dropped his head into his hands. When I found out she was free, I panicked, because for the first time in years, I actually have something to lose. Someone, multiple someones. Sophie, you, and Vivian knows how to hurt people, how to find weaknesses and exploit them. Clara felt anger warring with understanding. So you destroyed us publicly to protect us? I thought if she believed you didn't matter to me, she'd focus on me instead of you. That's all I was thinking about when I gave that speech. Not your feelings, not our relationship, just keeping you and Sophie safe. That's insane. I know. You should have told me. We could have figured something out together. I know that too. Ethan looked at her finally, and Clara saw real fear in his eyes. But all I could think about was Catherine, how I lost her and couldn't do anything to stop it, how she slipped away piece by piece and I was helpless. I can't watch that happen again. I can't lose someone else I love because I wasn't smart enough or strong enough to protect them. Clara's breath caught. What did you just say? Ethan blinked like he was just hearing his own words. I said, I can't lose someone I love. You love me? Of course I love you. Why do you think I'm losing my mind trying to keep you safe? You have a truly terrible way of showing it. I'm aware. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Clara, I'm sorry for the speech, for humiliating you, for being a coward. You were right about all of it, but please, please don't leave Sophie, don't leave me. We'll figure out how to handle Vivian together, but please come back to the house where I know you're protected. Clara looked at him. Saw the 9-year-old boy who'd run through a garden looking for someone to save him. Saw the grieving widower who'd loved his wife so much her death nearly destroyed him. Saw the father who'd do anything to protect his daughter. And she saw the man who just admitted he loved her while simultaneously making the worst decisions possible out of fear. I'm not leaving, she said quietly. But we're doing this my way from now on. No more lies. No more protecting me by destroying us. We handle Vivian together, or we don't handle her at all. Relief flooded Ethan's face. Okay, together. I promise. And you're going to call everyone from that gala and tell them the truth. What truth? That you're in love with your wife and you panicked because your psychotic stepmother escaped from prison and you made a stupid decision in a misguided attempt to protect me. Clara squeezed his hand. The actual truth, Ethan, for once in your life. He looked terrified. That's going to make me look weak. Good. You need to look human for a change. A sound that might have been a laugh escaped him. You're terrifying, you know that? You have no idea. Clara stood up, pulled him to his feet. Now take me home, and on the way you're going to tell me everything about Vivian Holloway, every detail, because if we're going to stop her from hurting this family, I need to know exactly what we're up against. Ethan pulled her into his arms, held her tight. I love you, he said into her hair. I'm sorry it took me humiliating you at a gala to figure out how to say it. Clara pulled back to look at him. Say it again. I love you. One more time. I love you, Clara Bennett Calloway, and I'm going to spend every day proving it until you actually believe me. Clara kissed him, tasted salt from tears, his or hers, she wasn't sure. I believe you. Now let's go home and figure out how to protect our daughter. Our daughter. The words felt right. They drove back to the estate together as the sun rose over the Atlantic, and Clara listened to Ethan describe the woman who'd tortured him as a child. The woman who was now somewhere in Newport, watching them, waiting for her chance to strike. But Clara wasn't afraid. Because this time, Ethan wasn't facing his demons alone. This time, they'd fight back together. The house felt different when they returned. Not cold anymore, but charged with purpose. Ethan had called his head of security during the drive, a former FBI agent named Marcus Chen, who'd been quietly investigating Vivian's movements since her release. He was waiting for them in Ethan's study when they arrived. Marcus was in his 40s, compact and efficient, the kind of man who noticed everything and said only what mattered. He spread photos across Ethan's desk like evidence at a crime scene. "She's been careful," Marcus said. "No direct contact, no threats we can prove, but she's been everywhere you are. The gala last night, Sophie's school twice last week, the coffee shop Clara goes to on Thursdays." Clara felt her skin crawl looking at the surveillance photos. Vivian in the background of a crowd at Sophie's winter concert. Vivian sitting 3 tables away at the cafe, always watching, always there. "How is she affording all this?" Clara asked. "I thought she lost everything when she went to prison." "She did. Best we can figure, she's got help. Someone bankrolling her, keeping her off our radar." Marcus pulled up another photo on his tablet. "This woman's been seen with Vivian multiple times. Regina Walsh. Runs a boutique law firm in Boston. Specializes in getting wealthy clients out of trouble." Ethan leaned forward. "I know that name. She represented one of my grandfather's competitors years ago. Tried to block our hotel expansion into Connecticut." "And lost," Marcus said. "Your grandfather crushed her case and her client's business. She's had it out for the Calloway family ever since." Clara looked between them. "So Vivian has a lawyer with a grudge funding her revenge plot. That's perfect. Just perfect." "The good news," Marcus continued, "is that Vivian's on parole. 1 violation and she goes back to prison. The bad news is she knows that, so she's being very careful not to actually break any laws." "Following people isn't illegal?" Clara asked. "Not if you're in public spaces. Not if you don't make threats or physical contact." Marcus closed his tablet. "We need her to make a move, something concrete we can take to the police." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Absolutely not. We're not using my family as bait. I'm not suggesting we do. I'm saying we need to be smart about this. Document everything, keep security tight, and wait for her to slip up." "How long could that take?" Marcus shrugged. "Could be days. Could be months. These kinds of stalking situations, they usually escalate. The question is what triggers the escalation." Clara had an idea forming, a terrible, dangerous idea that made her heart race. "What if we give her what she wants?" Both men looked at her. "Vivian wants revenge on Ethan," Clara continued. "She wants to hurt him the way she thinks he hurt her. So what if we make her think she has the perfect opportunity to do that?" "Clara, no," Ethan started. "Listen to me. She saw what happened at the gala. She knows Ethan publicly humiliated me. What if we use that? What if we make her think I'm vulnerable? That I'm angry at Ethan and might be willing to help her?" Marcus was nodding slowly. "Infiltrate her operation. Get close enough to record something incriminating." "Are you both insane?" Ethan stood up. "You want Clara to approach a woman who's genuinely dangerous, who has a history of violence, and pretend to be her ally? Absolutely not." "It's the fastest way to end this," Clara said. "You said it yourself. You can't live like this. Sophie can't grow up with a psychopath watching her every move. I also can't live with you getting hurt trying to protect us." Clara crossed to him, took his hands. "I'm not Catherine. I'm not fragile. And I'm not going to sit in this house like a prisoner while that woman circles our family like a shark." "She's right," Marcus said quietly. "Vivian's escalating. The frequency of her appearances is increasing. It's only a matter of time before she makes direct contact with someone in this household. Better it's Clara who'll be prepared than Sophie or the staff." Ethan looked at Clara like he was seeing her for the first time. Fear and pride and frustration all warring in his expression. "If anything happens to you, nothing's going to happen to me, because you're going to have Marcus and his entire team watching, and because I'm smarter than Vivian thinks I am." "I don't like this." "I know, but do you have a better idea?" He didn't. which is how Clara found herself 3 days later, sitting alone in the same coffee shop she visited every Thursday, waiting for Vivian Holloway to make her move. Marcus had 3 agents positioned around the cafe, one as a customer, one as staff, one in a van outside. Clara wore a wire so thin she could barely feel it against her skin. Her phone sat on the table, recording app activated and hidden behind her email. She'd been there for 20 minutes when Vivian walked in. Up close, she was smaller than Clara expected. Elegant, put together. The kind of woman who looked like she belonged at charity luncheons and museum boards. Nothing about her screamed dangerous, which made her more terrifying, not less. Vivian ordered tea, then approached Clara's table with a sympathetic smile. "Excuse me, dear. I don't mean to intrude, but aren't you Clara Calloway? Ethan Calloway's wife?" Clara looked up, making her expression carefully neutral. "I am. I thought I recognized you from the gala last week. What a terrible evening that must have been for you." Vivian's voice dripped false sympathy. "That speech! My heart just broke watching you stand there." Clara let anger flash across her face. Not hard to fake. She was still furious about the humiliation, even if she understood Ethan's reasoning. "Yeah, well, turns out my husband is great at speeches." "May I sit? Just for a moment?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. Vivian settled into the chair across from her like they were old friends. "I'm Vivian, by the way. Vivian Holloway. And before you ask, yes, I am related to Ethan. I was married to his father years ago." Clara forced surprise onto her face. "You're his stepmother." "Former stepmother. The family cut ties with me after my husband died. Ethan made quite sure of that." Vivian sipped her tea delicately. "But I don't hold grudges, dear. Water under the bridge." The lie was so smooth, Clara almost believed it. "I just wanted to tell you," Vivian continued, "that you don't have to stay in that situation. I know how the Calloways operate, how they use people and discard them when they're no longer useful. If you need help, legal help, financial help, I know people who could assist you." "That's very kind, but I'm fine. Are you? Because from what I saw at that gala, you looked like a woman who'd been used very publicly. And I'd hate to see Ethan get away with treating another woman the way he's treated so many others." Clara leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean, another woman?" Vivian's eyes gleamed. "His first wife, Catherine. Did he tell you how she really died?" "Cancer. Everyone knows that. That's what the death certificate says. But Catherine was perfectly healthy until she married into that family. Then suddenly she's sick? Convenient, don't you think?" Vivian lowered her voice conspiratorially. "I'm not saying Ethan did anything directly, but the stress of that marriage, of living with a man who's incapable of real love or warmth, that kind of stress destroys people from the inside out." Clara felt sick listening to this poison, but she kept her expression interested, curious. "I never thought about it that way," she said carefully. "Of course you didn't. Ethan is very good at playing the grieving widower, very good at making people feel sorry for him." Vivian reached across the table, patted Clara's hand. "But you seem like a smart woman. You must see the truth by now. That marriage contract isn't protection. It's a prison, and you have every right to break free." "Breaking free would be expensive," Clara said. "I signed a contract. Contracts can be challenged, especially if there's evidence of emotional abuse or fraud." Vivian pulled a business card from her purse. "This is my lawyer, Regina Walsh. She specializes in cases exactly like yours. One phone call and she'd have you out of that marriage with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life." Clara took the card, saw Marcus shift slightly in her peripheral vision, the signal to keep going. "Why are you helping me?" Clara asked. "You don't even know me." "Because I know Ethan. I raised that boy, and I know exactly what kind of man he became. Cold, manipulative, willing to use anyone to get what he wants." Vivian's mask slipped for just a second, showing real hatred underneath. "He destroyed my life because I tried to discipline him as a child, turned his grandfather against me, had me arrested on false charges, stole everything I'd built. And now he's doing the same thing to you, using you for appearances while humiliating you behind closed doors." "What hachis?" "The charges weren't false," Clara said quietly. Vivian's expression hardened. "I'm sorry?" "The charges, the embezzlement, the fraud. You went to prison because you stole money and hurt people, not because Ethan framed you. The The temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. I see, Vivian said slowly. He's gotten to you already, poisoned your mind against me. No one poisoned my mind. I just did basic research. Clara leaned back. And I talked to people who knew you back then, who saw what you did to a 9-year-old boy. Vivian stood abruptly, her chair scraping loud against the floor. You have no idea what you're talking about. I know you locked him in closets, burned him with cigarettes, told him he was worthless. Clara stood too, keeping her voice level. I know you made his childhood hell, and when he finally got away from you, you tried to destroy the man who saved him. That man kidnapped my stepson. That man rescued a child from an abuser. There's a difference. Vivian's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Clara thought she might actually swing. Marcus was already moving closer. Then Vivian laughed. It was a terrible sound, completely without humor. You stupid girl, you actually love him, don't you? Even after he humiliated you in front of half of Newport, even knowing that marriage is a sham, you love him. Yes, Clara said simply. I do. Then you're even more pathetic than I thought. Vivian grabbed her purse. When he destroys you, and he will destroy you, the way he destroys everyone who gets close to him, don't come crying to me for help. She left the cafe in a fury. Clara sat back down, her hands shaking. Marcus appeared at her table 60 seconds later. You okay? Did you get it? Please tell me the wire picked all that up? Every word. The part where she admitted to disciplining him. The implication that she was charged falsely. It's not a confession, but it's something. Marcus glanced toward the door. She's escalating faster than I expected. That comment about Catherine, about you being destroyed, those sound like threats. But not concrete enough to violate parole? Probably not. We need more. Clara's phone buzzed. Text from Ethan. Tell me you're safe. She texted back. Safe. Got some of it on tape. Coming home. The reply was immediate. I'm sorry I let you do this. Clara smiled despite her rattled nerves. You didn't let me. I insisted. There's a difference. When she got back to the estate, Ethan was waiting in the driveway. He pulled her out of the car and into his arms before she could say anything. Don't ever do that again, he said into her hair. I'm fine. She could have hurt you. In a crowded cafe with 3 of Marcus's people watching? Not likely. Clara pulled back to look at him. But Ethan, she's completely unhinged. The things she said about Catherine, about you, she genuinely believes she's the victim here. I know. I grew up with that. Every punishment was for my own good. Every cruelty was because I'd forced her hand. He cupped Clara's face. Which is why I don't want you anywhere near her again. We need more evidence. We'll find another way. But finding another way proved harder than either of them expected. Vivian disappeared for a week after the cafe confrontation. No sightings, no surveillance footage, nothing. Marcus ran down every lead and came up empty. She's either left town or gone underground, he reported. My guess is underground. She's planning something. The waiting was worse than the confrontation. Every strange noise made Clara jump. Every car that drove past the estate too slowly made Ethan tense. Sophie picked up on the tension and started having nightmares again, climbing into Clara's bed 3 or 4 times a week. When is the bad lady going away? She asked one night, her small face pressed against Clara's shoulder. Clara's stomach dropped. What bad lady, sweetheart? The one Daddy's scared of. I heard him talking to Marcus about her. Clara smoothed Sophie's hair back. She's going away soon, I promise. And until then, you're completely safe, okay? Okay. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Mama Clara? Yeah, baby? I'm glad you came back. After the party, when Daddy was being stupid. Clara couldn't help but laugh. Your daddy wasn't being stupid. He was scared. There's a difference. He's always scared of something, out of the mouths of children. Clara held Sophie closer. Yeah, sweetheart, he is, but that's okay. Brave people are scared too. They just don't let it stop them. Are you brave? I'm trying to be. 2 days before Christmas, Vivian made her move. Clara was in the garden. The roses were dormant now, but she still checked on them daily, making sure the winter mulch was holding. She heard footsteps on the path behind her and turned, expecting Margaret or one of the groundskeepers. Instead, she found Vivian. Clara's heart jumped into her throat. She reached for her phone, but Vivian held up her hands. I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to talk. Then talk from there. Clara kept 5 feet between them. Marcus's team was on site, but they were watching the front of the house. She was alone back here. Vivian looked around the garden and something sad crossed her face. Thomas Bennett designed this, didn't he? Your father. Clara didn't answer. I was here when he worked on it. Watched him plant those roses like they were precious jewels. Vivian moved closer to the white rose bush, the original one, now staked and recovering from the storm. I hated him. He stole my stepson from me, poisoned Ethan's mind against me. He saved Ethan from you. Is that what he told you? Vivian's voice was bitter. That I was some kind of monster? That I abused that boy? He showed me the scars, Vivian, the ones you gave him. I disciplined him. He was wild, uncontrollable. He was 9 years old. He was a liar. Vivian's composure cracked. Always making up stories, exaggerating every little thing. I barely touched him and he'd run crying to his grandfather about abuse. He destroyed my marriage, my reputation, my entire life because I tried to teach him respect. Clara stared at this woman and saw no remorse, no understanding, just rage and delusion wrapped in expensive clothes. You came here for a reason, Clara said. What do you want? Vivian's expression shifted, became almost pleading. I want you to convince Ethan to drop the restraining order he's planning to file, to tell the police you made a mistake, that I never threatened you. There's no restraining order. Don't lie to me. I know he's been working with lawyers. I know Marcus Chen has been building a case. Vivian pulled an envelope from her coat. I'm prepared to leave. Go back to Boston. Stay out of your lives completely. All I need is a guarantee that Ethan won't have me sent back to prison. You violated your parole by coming onto this property. It's a public estate. The gardens are open to visitors. Not in December, they're not. Vivian's mask fell completely. The rage underneath was terrifying. You stupid little girl. You have no idea what you're protecting. Ethan Calloway is poison. He poisons everything he touches. His mother died because she couldn't stand living with his father. Catherine died because the stress of that marriage destroyed her immune system. And you'll die too, one way or another, because that's what happens to everyone who loves him. You're wrong. Am I? Look around you, Clara. Look at this garden, the only beautiful thing on this property, and it's dying. Just like everyone who gets close to Ethan. The garden is dormant. It's winter. It'll bloom again in spring. Clara stepped closer. And Ethan isn't poison. He's a man who survived a nightmare childhood because one good person saw what was happening and helped him. And he spent his whole life trying to honor that kindness by being a good father, a good businessman, a good person. Something you'll never understand because you're too busy blaming a 9-year-old boy for your own failures. Vivian moved fast. 1 second she was standing by the roses. The next she had Clara by the arm, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. Let go of me. Not until you listen. Ethan Calloway took everything from me, and I'm going to take everything from him, starting with you. Clara twisted, trying to break free. Security is watching. They'll be here any second. Good. Let them come. Let them watch me exercise my right to have a conversation on public property. Vivian's grip tightened. You tell Ethan that I'm not going away. Tell him I'll haunt every moment of his miserable life until he admits what he did to me, until he confesses that he lied, that he destroyed an innocent woman because he was a spoiled, manipulative child who couldn't handle discipline. Then she was gone. Released Clara and walked away like nothing had happened, disappearing through the garden gate before security arrived. Clara stood there shaking, her arm throbbing where Vivian had grabbed her. Marcus appeared 30 seconds later with 2 other agents. I'm sorry, he said, fury in his voice. We didn't see her come onto the property. She must have climbed the north wall. Did you get it? Clara asked. Please tell me the cameras got it. Every second. That was assault. And she admitted to planning to harm you. Combined with the cafe recording, we have enough for a parole violation. Clara looked at the roses, thinking about what Vivian had said, about poison and death and everything beautiful dying. But she was wrong. The garden wasn't dying. It was resting, gathering strength for the next season. Just like Ethan had been resting all these years, gathering strength, learning how to bloom again. Call the police, Clara said. End this. The arrest happened fast. Vivian was taken into custody that evening, charged with parole violation, assault, and criminal threatening. Regina Walsh tried to fight it, but Marcus had too much evidence. The recordings, the surveillance footage, witness statements from a dozen people who'd seen Vivian stalking the family. She'd be going back to prison for a long time. Ethan held Clara that night like he was afraid she might disappear. They lay in his bed, their bed now, the charade of separate rooms abandoned weeks ago, and he traced the bruises on her arm with gentle fingers. "I'm sorry," he said for the 100th time. "Stop apologizing. We got her. It's over." "You could have been seriously hurt, but I wasn't." Clara turned to face him. "Ethan, you have to stop carrying guilt for things that aren't your fault. Vivian made her choices. She hurt you as a child. She broke laws as an adult. And she came after our family because she's incapable of taking responsibility for her own actions. None of that is on you." "She was right about one thing," Ethan said quietly. "Everyone who gets close to me does get hurt. My mother, Catherine, now you." Clara put her hand over his mouth. "Your mother left because your father was absent and she couldn't handle being a Calloway. Catherine died of cancer, not heartbreak. And I got a few bruises taking down your abuser, which honestly makes me feel pretty good about myself. Stop writing this narrative where you're cursed or toxic or whatever else that woman put in your head." He pulled her hand away but held on to it. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "You didn't find me. My father sent me to you." Clara smiled. "He knew exactly what he was doing, sending me to the one man who'd understand what it means to build something from broken pieces. Your father was too smart for his own good. He really was." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time since Vivian's release, Ethan didn't wake up in the middle of the night checking security feeds. Christmas came 3 days later. Clara woke to Sophie jumping on the bed, shrieking about presents and snow, and could they please open gifts now before breakfast? Ethan groaned, pulled a pillow over his head. "It's 6 in the morning, sweetheart." "But it's Christmas," Clara laughed, pushing the pillow off Ethan's face. "Come on, Scrooge. Let's go see what's under the tree." The living room was transformed. Margaret had gone all out with decorations while Clara and Ethan were dealing with Vivian. A massive tree covered in lights and ornaments, garland and candles, and enough festive cheer to make a Hallmark movie jealous. Sophie tore into her presents with the single-minded focus of a 5-year-old. Ethan watched with an expression of pure contentment, and Clara felt her heart swell watching them. Then Sophie pulled out a small wrapped box Clara didn't recognize. "This one's for you, Mama Clara. From Daddy." Clara looked at Ethan. He shrugged, trying to look casual and failing completely. Inside the box was a ring, not the simple platinum wedding band from their contract marriage. This was an engagement ring, a single perfect diamond set in white gold with roses engraved along the band. Clara's breath caught. "I know we did this backward," Ethan said, suddenly looking nervous. "Got married first, fell in love later. But I wanted to ask you properly this time. Not because of a contract or a debt or anything practical, just because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He got down on one knee, right there in the living room with wrapping paper everywhere, and Sophie watching with huge eyes. "Clara Bennett Calloway, will you marry me? Again? For real this time." Clara was crying. Happy tears, the kind she'd forgotten existed. "We're already married, you idiot." "I know, but this time I'm asking you to stay because you want to, not because you have to. This time I'm promising to be the husband you deserve, not just the business partner who pays your bills. This time." Clara kissed him. Let the ring box fall to the floor as she wrapped her arms around his neck. "Yes," she said against his mouth. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it." Sophie cheered. Ethan slipped the ring onto Clara's finger next to her wedding band, and it fit perfectly. They spent Christmas Day together, just the three of them, building snowmen in the garden, making hot chocolate that Sophie insisted on adding way too many marshmallows to, reading Christmas stories by the fire while snow fell outside the windows. It was perfect. Not in a fairy tale way, but in a real way. Messy and warm and filled with the kind of love that survives storms and threats and all the broken pieces people bring to each other. That night, after Sophie had finally crashed from sugar and excitement, Claire and Ethan stood at the window overlooking the garden. The snow had covered everything in white, making the world look new. "I want to renew our vows," Ethan said. Have a real wedding. Invite people we actually like instead of business associates. Maybe in the spring, when the roses bloom. In the garden. In the garden, where your father planted the first seeds of this whole thing. He pulled her closer. And I want to adopt Sophie. Legally make you her mother, not just in practice. Clara turned to look at him. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed her forehead. You already are her mother in every way that matters. This just makes it official. Then yes, to all of it. The wedding, the adoption, everything. They stood together in the quiet house, watching snow cover the sleeping garden, and Clara thought about her father's letter, about promises and debts and the strange ways life works out. He'd sent her to this house thinking he was paying off an old favor, but really, he'd been planting seeds, just like he'd done with the roses 23 years ago. And now, finally, everything was starting to bloom. Winter gave way to early spring slower than Clara wanted. She'd wake up each morning and check the garden, looking for signs of life beneath the mulch and snow. Ethan would find her out there in her pajamas and coat, kneeling in the cold dirt like she could will the roses to bloom through sheer determination. They'll come when they're ready, he'd say, handing her coffee. I know. I just want to see them. Want to know my father's garden survived everything. It survived. We all did. The adoption papers went through in February. Judge Morrison signed off on everything in his chambers with Sophie present, making it official. Clara Bennett Calloway was now legally Sophie's mother. Sophie had insisted on wearing her fanciest dress for the occasion, and when the judge asked if she understood what this meant, she'd said very seriously, "It means Mama Clara can't leave even if she wanted to." The judge had smiled. "That's exactly what it means, sweetheart." On the courthouse steps afterward, Sophie had grabbed both their hands. Now we're a real family. Ethan had looked at Clara over their daughter's head, and she'd seen tears in his eyes. Yeah, sweetheart, now we're real. Planning the vow renewal became Clara's project. She didn't want something huge or showy. They'd already done the performance marriage at galas and events. This needed to be intimate. True, just the people who mattered. Margaret helped with logistics, clearly delighted to be planning something joyful instead of managing crisis after crisis. A spring wedding in the rose garden, she'd said, clasping her hands together. It's perfect, romantic. Your father would have loved it. Clara thought so too. She'd spent hours in the library going through old photos her father had kept, finding pictures of himself planting those first roses. He looked young in the photos, healthy, full of hope, like he'd known even then that he was building something that would last. She found one photo that stopped her cold. Her father standing next to a 9-year-old Ethan, both of them covered in dirt, huge smiles on their faces. Her father's hand on the boy's shoulder like he was saying, "You're safe now." Ethan found her crying over that photo late one night. "I miss him," Clara said. "I wish he could be here to see this, to know that his crazy plan actually worked." Ethan sat beside her, studying the photo. "I think he knew it would work. That's why he did it." "How could he have known?" "Because he understood something I didn't back then, that the people who save us aren't trying to fix us. They're just showing us we're worth saving." Ethan traced the edge of the photo. "He did that for me when I was 9, and then he did it for you by sending you here. He was telling both of us that we deserved a second chance." Clara leaned against him. "I used to be so angry at him, for leaving me with nothing, for making me feel like I had to marry a stranger to survive. But he wasn't leaving me with nothing. He was leaving me with everything. He was a smart man. Too smart. Figured out what we both needed before we even knew ourselves." The trial for Vivian happened in March. Clara had to testify about the assault in the garden, about the threats. She'd been nervous walking into that courtroom, but then she'd seen Vivian sitting at the defense table looking smaller somehow, and the fear had evaporated. This woman had terrorized a child, had spent years blaming that child for her own choices, had stalked their family and made threats because she couldn't accept responsibility for her actions. Clara's testimony was clear and factual. She didn't embellish, didn't dramatize, just told the truth about what Vivian had said and done. Regina Walsh tried to paint Clara as a gold digger who'd manipulated Ethan into false accusations, but the recordings didn't lie. The surveillance footage didn't lie. And when Ethan took the stand and showed the jury scars from cigarette burns he'd received at age 9, even Walsh had gone quiet. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. came back with guilty verdicts on all counts. Vivian was sentenced to 12 years, no chance of parole. Outside the courthouse, Ethan had pulled Clara into his arms and just held on. It's really over. It's over. I keep waiting to feel relieved or happy, but I just feel tired. That's okay. You've been carrying this for 23 years. You're allowed to be tired. Clara pulled back to look at him. Now you get to put it down and actually live. Sophie had been staying with Ethan's grandfather during the trial. Neither of them wanted her exposed to the ugliness. When they picked her up that evening, she'd thrown herself at both of them. Did you win? She'd asked. We won, sweetheart. Does that mean the bad lady can't come back? She can't come back. You're safe. We all are. Sophie had thought about this seriously. Good, because I'm tired of having bad dreams. That night, for the first time in months, Sophie slept through in her own bed. No nightmares. No midnight visits to Clara's room. Just peaceful sleep. Clara had stood in Sophie's doorway watching her daughter breathe and felt something settle in her chest that had been restless since her father died. Purpose, maybe. Or just the simple peace of knowing she was exactly where she was supposed to be. April arrived with the first green shoots pushing through the garden mulch. Clara checked them obsessively, documenting each new leaf, each bud beginning to form. Joe's crew came back to do spring maintenance, but Clara did most of the work herself. She needed to feel the same dirt her father had touched, needed to coax life from the same plants he'd tended. You're going to wear yourself out, Margaret said, bringing water to the garden one warm afternoon. I'm fine. Almost done anyway. Clara sat back, surveying the beds. They'd lost some bushes to the storm and winter, but the core of the garden had survived. The white rose bush, the original, was putting out new growth like it was determined to thrive. Your father would be proud of you, Margaret said, not just for saving the garden, for everything. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Again. She cried more now than she ever had before, but they were different tears. Not grief or fear or desperation, just feeling, just being alive enough to let emotions through. I hope so, she said. I really hope so. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in May. Clara had invited exactly 17 people, Margaret, Marcus and his wife, Sophie's teacher, a few friends she'd made volunteering at the school, and Ethan's grandfather, who'd insisted on flying in from Boston despite being 92 and hating to travel. Ethan had invited about the same number. His core team from the company, a few genuine friends versus business associates, and the lawyer who'd helped with the adoption. Small, intimate, real. The day before the wedding, Clara went to visit her father's grave. She hadn't been since the funeral, hadn't been able to face it, but now she needed to tell him everything that had happened. The cemetery was quiet in the late afternoon sun. Clara knelt beside the headstone and traced her father's name with her fingers. Hi, Dad. Sorry it took me so long to visit. Her voice cracked. I was angry at you for a while, for leaving, for that crazy letter and the marriage contract and forcing me into a life I didn't choose. But I get it now. You weren't forcing me into anything. You were just opening a door and trusting me to walk through it. A breeze rustled the trees overhead. Clara smiled through tears. I'm getting married tomorrow. I mean, I'm already married, but this time it's real. It's not a contract or a debt or anything except two people who love each other choosing to stay together. And we're doing it in the garden you built. The roses are about to bloom, Dad. They made it through the storm, just like you knew they would. She pulled the photo from her pocket, the one of her father and young Ethan covered in dirt and smiling. You saved him. And then you saved me by sending me to him. That's what you did, isn't it? Planted us both in the same garden and trusted we'd grow together. Clara stayed until the sun started setting, telling her father about Sophie and the adoption and Vivian's trial, and how Ethan still got up at 5 a.m. every Sunday to tend the roses. About how they were building something neither of them had expected, but both of them needed. When she finally left, she felt lighter, like she'd been carrying her father's coffin on her shoulders and had finally set it down. Ethan was waiting when she got home. He took one look at her face and pulled her into his arms. You okay? Yeah, I am. She looked up at him. Are you ready for tomorrow? I'm ready to marry you every day for the rest of my life, so yeah, I'm ready. That night they stayed up late in the library just talking about everything and nothing, about their future and Sophie's future and whether they wanted more kids someday. About expanding the hotel business into Europe, or maybe selling some properties and focusing on quality over quantity. About growing old together in this house by the sea, watching grandchildren play in the garden someday. Do you ever regret it? Ethan asked around midnight. Saying yes to that contract? Coming here when you didn't know what you were walking into? Clara thought about it honestly. I regret not having my father here to see this. I regret the months we wasted pretending we didn't care about each other. But the decision itself? No, I don't regret it. Because even when it was hard, even when I was lonely or confused or angry, I was building towards something. I was becoming someone I actually like. That's worth something. You've always been someone worth liking. Maybe, but I didn't know it. I was just surviving, going through motions, waiting for my real life to start. And then it did start, and it looked nothing like I'd imagined, but it was better than anything I could have planned. Ethan kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. Tomorrow, we're going to stand in that garden and promise each other forever. And I need you to know that I mean it. Not because of contracts or debts or anything your father asked me to do, just because I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. Good, Clara said. Because you're stuck with me now, legally and emotionally. Best kind of stuck. The wedding morning arrived clear and perfect. Clara woke early to Sophie bouncing on the bed again, this time with Margaret trying to wrangle her into her flower girl dress. She's been up since 5, Margaret said apologetically, too excited to sleep. I'm getting a real mommy and daddy wedding, Sophie announced, with flowers and everything. Clara laughed, pulling her daughter into a hug. Yes, you are, sweetheart. Now let Margaret finish with your dress while I get ready. Getting ready felt surreal. Clara had chosen a simple dress. Cream-colored silk, tea-length, nothing like the designer gown she'd worn to galas. This dress felt like her, comfortable and elegant and real. Margaret helped with her hair, twisting it into something soft and romantic. Light makeup. The engagement ring Ethan had given her at Christmas catching the light. You look beautiful, dear, Margaret said, eyes suspiciously bright. Like a bride who's actually happy to be getting married. I am happy. Happier than I knew how to be. The ceremony was set for 11 a.m., when the sun would be perfect in the garden. Clara waited in the house with Sophie while guests arrived and took their seats in the white chairs Joe's crew had set up among the roses. Then it was time. Margaret walked Sophie down first, the little girl taking her job very seriously as she scattered rose petals. Then Clara's turn. She'd asked Marcus to walk her down the aisle. He'd protected them through everything, felt right to have him beside her now. But as she stepped into the garden, Clara barely noticed Marcus or the guests or the beautiful setup. All she saw was Ethan. He was standing at the end of the aisle in a dark suit, no tie, looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Beside him stood his grandfather, who'd insisted on officiating despite being 92 and having no legal authority to marry anyone. They'd gotten the license signed earlier by an actual official, but today was about symbolism, not paperwork. Clara walked toward Ethan through her father's garden, and she swore she could feel him there. Could almost see him kneeling in the dirt 23 years ago, planting the first white rose and knowing somehow that it would all lead here. Ethan took her hands when she reached him. His eyes were wet. You're beautiful, he whispered. You clean up okay yourself. Ethan's grandfather cleared his throat, grinning. Shall we begin? The ceremony was short. No long speeches or traditional vows, just Ethan's grandfather talking about love and second chances, and how the best things in life usually come from the most unexpected places. Then Ethan and Clara faced each other, and it was time for their vows. Ethan went first. Clara, when you showed up at my door 7 months ago, I thought I was honoring a debt, paying back the man who saved my life by helping his daughter when she needed it. But your father was smarter than that. He knew what we both needed before we did. He knew that I'd been hiding for 6 years, and you'd been drowning for longer than that. And together we might actually figure out how to live again. His voice cracked. Clara squeezed his hands. I don't have pretty words or romantic speeches, Ethan continued. I'm not good at this, but I can promise you that I will show up every day. I will tend these roses with you at dawn. I will be the father Sophie deserves. I will love you even when I'm scared, even when it's hard, even when I want to run and hide behind walls. I will choose you every single day for the rest of my life. That's my promise. Clara was crying now, happy tears. She took a shaky breath. Ethan, my father sent me here thinking he was giving me a way out of debt and poverty. But really, he was giving me a home, a family, a man who understands what it means to build something beautiful from broken pieces. You weren't looking for love when I arrived, and honestly, neither was I. We were both just surviving. But survival isn't the same as living, and you taught me the difference. She looked around his garden, at the roses beginning to bloom around them. My father planted this garden 23 years ago. Planted it with patience and hope and faith that someday it would be something beautiful. That's what we're doing too, planting a life together. And it might not always be easy, and there will definitely be storms, but I know we'll weather them. Because we already have, so I promise to keep showing up, to keep choosing you, to keep building this life with you one day at a time until we're old and gray and still tending these roses together. Ethan's grandfather wiped his eyes. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Again, for real this time. Ethan, kiss your bride. Ethan did. It was soft and sweet and tasted like hope. Sophie cheered. The small crowd applauded, and Clara felt something click into place, like the last piece of a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving. The reception was in the house. Margaret had outdone herself with food and flowers and details Clara hadn't even known to ask for. They ate and danced and celebrated, and Clara found herself laughing more than she had in years. Ethan's grandfather cornered her at one point, his ancient eyes sharp and knowing. You're good for him. Best thing that's happened to that boy since your father pulled him out of hell. He's good for me too. I know. That's why it works. He patted her hand. Thomas called me before he died. Told me his plan. I thought he was crazy, arranging a marriage for his daughter like we were living in the 1800s. But he said he'd watched Ethan for 23 years, and he knew. Knew that boy needed someone who understood loss and survival and building from nothing, someone who wouldn't be intimidated by the money or the walls, someone who'd fight for him even when he was being an idiot. Clara's throat tightened. He really said that? Every word. He loved you so much, Clara. And he loved Ethan like the son he never had. So he built a bridge between you and trusted you both to meet in the middle. The old man smiled. Smart bastard. Worked out exactly like he planned. Later, as the sun set over the garden and guests started leaving, Clara found Ethan standing by the original white rose bush. It had bloomed that morning, perfect white flowers opening to the spring air like a benediction. It's beautiful, she said, slipping her hand into his. Your father's legacy. Ethan pulled her close. He planted this knowing he'd never see it fully grown, just had faith it would bloom. Like us. Like us. They stood together in the garden as the last light faded, watching the roses sway in the ocean breeze. Sophie ran past with another flower girl from the wedding, both of them laughing and spinning and completely happy. Thank you, Ethan said quietly. For what? For saying yes. For staying. For fighting Vivian. For loving Sophie. For loving me even when I gave you every reason not to. He turned to face her. For being brave enough to build a life with a broken man who's still figuring out how to be whole. Clara cupped his face. You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference. And I'm healing too. We're healing together. Is that what this is? Yeah, that's exactly what this is. Margaret appeared on the terrace. Sophie's asking for bedtime stories. Both of you, apparently. They went inside together, climbed the stairs to Sophie's room where their daughter was already in bed clutching her stuffed rabbit. They read to her, switching off paragraphs, making funny voices, being completely ridiculous. Sophie laughed until she could barely breathe, then yawned so wide her whole face scrunched up. Best day ever, she mumbled, already half asleep. Yeah, sweetheart, Ethan said, kissing her forehead. Best day ever. Clara kissed her too, tucked the blankets around her small body. Sweet dreams, baby girl. Love you, Mama Clara. Love you, Daddy. Love you too. They left the door cracked open, light from the hallway spilling into Sophie's room. Clara leaned against Ethan in the corridor. We have a daughter. We have a daughter, he agreed, and a house by the sea, and a garden that survived a storm, and each other. Ethan pulled her into their bedroom, their actual shared bedroom now, no more pretending otherwise. And forever. Don't forget forever. Clara laughed. How could I forget? You reminded me about 3 times today. Just making sure you know what you signed up for. I know exactly what I signed up for. A complicated man with abandonment issues, and a tendency to work too much, and a terrible habit of keeping emotions locked away until a crisis forces them out. When you put it that way, I sound like a catch. You are a catch. You're my catch. Claire pulled him down to kiss her. And I'm keeping you. They made love that night like newlyweds because they were, sort of. Everything felt new and precious and worth celebrating. Afterward, they lay tangled together, windows open to let in the sound of the ocean and the smell of roses blooming in the dark. Do you think he knew? Clara asked sleepily. My father. Do you think he knew it would end up like this? Ethan was quiet for a moment. I think he hoped. Planted the seeds and hoped we'd be smart enough to water them. We almost weren't, but we were. In the end, we were. Clara drifted off thinking about gardens and seeds and patience, about how the best things take time to grow, about how love isn't always immediate or easy, but when it's real, it's worth the wait. The next morning, she woke to find Ethan already gone. For a second, old fear flickered. Was he retreating again? Building walls? But then she heard Sophie's laughter from outside and knew. She found them in the garden at dawn. Ethan was showing Sophie how to deadhead roses, teaching her the same way Thomas had taught him 23 years ago. Sophie was concentrating hard, her small hands careful with the clippers. Like this, Daddy? Exactly like that, sweetheart. Perfect. Clara watched from the terrace, her heart so full it ached. This was her father's real gift. Not money or security or a way out of debt. This. A man who'd learned to love again, a daughter who'd never doubt she was wanted, a garden that bloomed year after year, proof that beautiful things could grow from painful beginnings. Ethan looked up and saw her, smiled that smile that was only for her. Come help us, he called. We've got a lot of roses to tend. Clara walked down to join her family in the garden her father had planted. The morning sun was warm on her shoulders. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and flowers, and for the first time in her entire life, Clara felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Not because someone had told her to be there, not because a contract required it, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she'd chosen it. They'd all chosen it, chosen each other, and chosen to build something real from the rubble of their broken pieces. The roses bloomed around them, white and pink and red and yellow, every color her father had planted all those years ago. They would bloom every spring for decades to come, outliving all of them, a living reminder that the things we build with love last longer than the things we build alone. Clara knelt in the dirt beside her husband and daughter and felt her father's presence in the earth beneath her hands. He was here, in the roses, in the garden, in the family he'd helped create by trusting 2 broken people to save each other. Thank you, Dad, she whispered, for everything. The breeze picked up, rustling through the roses like a response, like he'd heard her, like he'd been waiting for this moment all along, the moment when his daughter finally understood that the real gift wasn't the marriage or the money or the mansion. It was the chance to bloom, and bloom she had. They all had, together.